What's up, Read My Mind Radio family? Thanks for joining me this week. In thinking about this episode, I decided to open the vault. This podcast has been in existence since 2014, so I'm referring to the archives as the vault because I think there's value in what's going on to be about 9 years worth of episodes. In 2015, when all the episodes were really being produced for Gatewave Radio, I produced a couple of episodes on audio description. One was about Marvel's Daredevil and what many believe was a bad move by Netflix in releasing the series without providing access for blind viewers in the form of audio description. We learned later that behind the scenes, even before the release of Daredevil, there were conversations taking place that helped lead to the access we enjoy today. Less than 10 years later, the future of AD doesn't feel as bright as it did back then. Who do we turn to? Sometimes it feels like, no one will save us! That's up next. But first, let me protect the archives and close the vault. Read
my mind.
Read
My mind.
Today's conversation ultimately is about advocacy. And we know this isn't new. It feels like so much of what we as disabled people want, access to employment, art and culture, transportation, you name it, requires a significant amount of advocacy. This is flipping the script, so we're specifically talking about audio description. But personally, I feel there's lessons that go beyond AD and apply to us all, no matter the specific disability. One form of advocacy is making space for the conversation. That's not a one-time thing. It requires revisiting and hopefully bringing in new people and new ideas. Sometimes we have to challenge the ideas that are put forth. Like when in conversation with other blind people on the subject of improving or increasing audio description, someone inevitably says something like, why can't audio description be more like captions? What's your response to that idea that, oh, the deaf community has it all together, captions are great, blind people need to learn from that to get audio description to meet that same sort of level?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, it's one oppressed group talking badly about another oppressed group, thinking that oppressed group is doing better than they are, which unfortunately is one of the hallmarks of oppression in general. So if you're getting jealous of someone else with a disability, then that's part of the problem. Secondly, I don't think captions are as commonplace as they should be. I really do try and advocate for both captions and audio description. Both of them just need advocacy throughout.
That's Michael McNeely.
I live in Toronto, Canada. My pronouns are he, him. I work as a lawyer for the Department of Justice. I'm also a filmmaker and a film critic. I provide film criticism for AMI TV, which is a news station in Canada. I have about 6,000 listeners for my film criticism. And I have also released a film today. It's called Advocacy Club.
Tell me about it.
It's a documentary about my former workplace, which is called the Canadian Hearing Care Centre. It's also located in Toronto. It's a training center for people who are deafblind, and it's a residential center. I was an advocacy instructor, and now I'm just a lawyer on consult. I was helping clients with any issues that they had with regard to standing up for themselves or advocating. It's about why these people need to stand up for the issues that they keep having in their lives, and how we became closer together as a result.
According to the film's webpage, Michael is the first deafblind person to direct the film. You can learn more about the film at advocacyclubfilm.com. Tell me a little bit about your relationship to disability. I don't get too much into the diagnoses and all of that, but whatever you want to share around your relationship with disability.
Now, I don't even remember my diagnosis. I just remember that my geneticist is very excited about me because she seems to have discovered a new disease. I told her to name after me. As far as I know, I've always been disabled my whole life. This is who I am. This is what you get. I'm actually fascinated by how other people perceive my disability. So sometimes people think that being deafblind is the saddest thing in the world. I don't think it's the saddest thing in the world. I think there's a lot of things that are sadder. I do have privilege, and I'm happy to use my privilege for the common good.
If only more people thought about their privilege that way. That's another story. But for now, back to the question. Are captions really the North Star for access?
In Canada, we have movie theaters that are mostly run by Cineplex. I would say they have a monopoly. Cineplex uses the Captiview machine, which is a device that you can put in your cup holder, and you can watch captions that way. Not all movies work with this, so it really depends on institutional knowledge, as well as the movies being made compatible with the technology. Unfortunately, for a lot of people with vision challenges, the Captiview device would not be accessible to them since it's quite small. So you have to be able to read the words in the Captiview machine to gain any benefit from it. I would talk about open captions.
Open captions don't require any specialized technology. They're on screen for anyone to see.
Just like when you go to the gym, people can't hear the TV, so you read the captioning. I think open captions would change the dialogue of captioning in general, because you should be able to see a caption anytime you watch a movie.
That visibility normalizes access. No longer is it hidden away, and others will be able to report when captions aren't working properly or even available. Similar to many of our experiences with AD, captions aren't always available. Sometimes it's the technology. Other times, it's a film that was delivered without them altogether, in theater and at home. So was television as the theater? How about the streaming captions?
I've been buying a lot of different subscriptions to streaming services, and I cancel them, if I remember, within the trial subscription period. But I try and do that just to see how good the captioning is and how reliable it is. I think Disney Plus is pretty good. I think Netflix is doing captioning very well. Amazon sometimes does not have things captioned, but I've emailed the customer service. I've asked them to put captions in. Sometimes they've listened, sometimes they haven't. I try and make an argument that if I pay for a subscription service, then I'm paying for 100% accessibility.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Amazon's subscription service is tied to Prime. Nor do I think it's a coincidence that Michael has experienced a lack of captions on the platform. For many disabled people, however, canceling a service like Hulu is much easier than canceling their Prime account. The latter makes purchasing all sorts of products accessible and extremely convenient, and I don't doubt that they are fully aware of this. We discuss access in movie theaters, at home, on television, and streaming. Film festivals?
Some are better and some are worse. I've actually filed a human rights complaint against a film festival that was not attempting to be accessible. But luckily I've been able to work with a few great film festivals. And I think at that point you just want to know how much of the content is accessible. So if you can say, 100% of the films have closed captioning, 30% have audio description, that would be a good way to advertise the accessibility of the festival and to know, how accessible a festival is before buying tickets for it. One of the recommendations I've made working for a film festival is to provide discounted passes for people with disabilities, not just because people with disabilities tend to make less money, but also because the content is less accessible. So, for example, if the Toronto International Film Festival has 300 movies, but only 200 of those movies are accessible, then I should only be paying for those 200 movies instead of a full market price.
Advocating with our dollars as well as our voices. I support it. I'm starting to think that ubiquitous captions aren't actually a thing. And even though captions, which are indeed more widely available in comparison to audio description, similar to AD, it doesn't guarantee quality.
Quality and the consistency isn't there. But I know it's not the captionists' fault. I have great respect for the captionists. I've seen them work in person, especially in the court system. They probably don't have time to think about the content. They just have time to type as fast as they can.
It's not about blaming one party. Every role in the process plays a part. Executives set the standard by creating a climate of inclusion, insisting that access is a part of the culture from the beginning, making sure to include the community to determine what's good access, choosing not to procure services solely by price, and paying attention to quality. As Michael said, we can use the power of our dollars by not supporting services offering poor quality. And sometimes that just means walking away altogether.
I stopped watching reality TV, and I stopped watching news, and I stopped watching the Oscars live. The captioning just wasn't doing it for me. One of the things with watching live entertainment is that the captioning doesn't keep up. I was watching the news. I was reading in the captioning that a serial killer was on the loose and had killed a few people. But when I looked at the TV screen to see what the segment was about, it was a seniors quilting festival. So I thought maybe there was a serial killer loose at the seniors quilting festival. I haven't been able to watch the news again since.
Wow. The captions were that bad frequently?
Yes, I think it's better to watch a documentary because you know that there's been post-production done with it.
What about automated captions?
Oh my goodness, we use the automated captioning on Zoom. And I can tell you that it never gets anything right. It is one of the most distracting things I could ever imagine. It comes up with the most ridiculous things that I've never said or would ever say. For example, it said something about a whale's anatomy, and I wasn't even talking about whales or anatomy.
One of the problems around automated captions is context. Even when it does properly transcribe what someone is saying, it doesn't include the speaker's name.
So that can be hard sometimes. As a lawyer, I need to know who I'm speaking to sometimes. There can be sensitive and triggering phrases that are accidentally placed in the captioning. I've seen rape, even when we were not talking about sexual assault whatsoever, and I can just imagine that would trigger someone. Just having the word appear at random. As you probably noticed, I have an accent. I have a deaf accent. So sometimes the captioning doesn't understand my accent. It can be insulting because it reminds me that I have an accent. It reminds me that I have speech problems. So it's one of those things that makes me feel like I'm taking a step backwards. On another note, if you're asking someone who's deaf or hearing impaired to try and interpret the captioning, you're asking them to make themselves tired before 10 a.m. If I play these games with myself, if I play let's guess the word that Tom is said, the game gets pretty old, there's no prize. I don't know if I win or not.
I feel similarly about watching content without AD. I can try to follow along as best I can, but I won't know unless I have a conversation with someone who has full access or I do some research online. Not really the way I like to personally watch movies. My choice? Well-crafted, culturally competent description written with love that centers the Blind community. And the best way to make that happen?
Making the film at the beginning with an awareness of descriptive audio has been required. Let's say I was going to make a slasher film, and I wanted to ensure that my audience understands what's happening. I'm probably going to put in some pauses. I'm going to put in some reflective periods. I'm going to not have the action happen all at once. It's maybe going to be a bit longer movie, but it's going to be more accessible. And it's going to make the point that everyone can enjoy this kind of film. We don't expect blind people to go see a slasher movie, but perhaps they can if it was accessible for them.
That's audio description not only as access, but something we promote here quite often, seeing audio description as a creative tool, rather than a mandated requirement.
When you get to the part when you're talking about compliance, it's already too late to actually make much of a difference. I'm not going to say creative, because creative could have been implemented since the beginning. But if you're talking about compliance, it sounds like you're leaving it to the last minute. the automated captioning situation, it just comes off as not caring enough about people with disabilities. It's just checking off something. It's just doing something that a computer does by itself. It's not actually useful unless you go in and check it yourself.
See how the lines just got blurred? This is true for both audio description and captions. We talk about the opportunity to be more creative with AD and have seen a range of examples of that. Opportunities exist for captions as well. For example, color-coded fonts that represent different people or emotions. However, some of the creative ideas, like moving the captions off the bottom third, can break access.
Because if you don't know where the words are on the screen, then it's not really helping anybody. Imagination is the limit. But one of the challenges is, how can you be creative and accessible at the same time?
I also heard about the lack of description of all things, sound in caption. Would you say there's like a need for improvement there? So, for example, when music plays, how descriptive are they about the music that's in the background? Or do you get that?
If there's a fight scene and the caption says birds chirping in the background, I'm like, who cares? I don't care unless the bird is actually involved in this fight scene. I've seen captions that when there's a person walking on the street, it says street sounds. When the person's driving, it says driving sounds. I'm like, obviously this person's driving, and obviously they're making sounds. So give me some new information about that. It's like the classic philosophical question, how do I describe blue to you as a person who is completely blind? How do you describe sound to me who is completely deaf? Not everybody is the same.
Yeah. Depending on what the film is, when we talk about describing blue, is the color blue important, or is it more about the feeling, the message there? Is this relating to the blues, as in sadness?
Yeah, 100%. I've just been learning about color aspects of filmmaking. You know, if you want somebody to feel relaxed, you may do lots of greens and blues. If you want someone to feel angry or violent, you probably do red, that kind of thing.
So what would you like to see more from caption writers?
I like the caption writers to introduce themselves at the beginning and to provide a contact. If there's any challenges with the captioning that they've provided, I like to provide feedback. I think that's always something that made me feel better when I was at court. I knew it was Joanne that was doing the captioning. I knew it was Mark that was doing the captioning. I knew it was a human being.
It's not surprising that those companies producing solid AD tend to include their company names and both writer and narrator in the credits. One has to wonder why this isn't standard practice for both AD and captions.
I think it's about accountability, providing a service. I think we just get this tendency where people with disabilities are supposed to just accept what's given to them just because we don't have anything better. We assume that everything that we receive is okay, everything that we receive gives us the equal playing field, or it gives us better advantages than other people in life. But that's simply because there's a lack of transparency and communication about the accommodations that have been delivered.
Michael even suggested a feedback form where folks could comment on the quality of the captions. I talked about something similar for AD during one of our BCAD chats. That's Blind-Centered Audio Description chats, which you can find on this podcast feed or head over to readmymind.com. Shout out to my fellow BCAD chat partners, Nefertiti Matos Olivares and Cheryl Green. I have some pretty good ideas around how such a feedback form, well, really a full website, could function, providing not only a means for feedback, but community as well. Anyone wanting to finance such a project, hit me up, readmymindradio@gmail.com. I'm just saying. Now that we heard from someone quite familiar with captions, do you think that's the bar we as advocates for audio description should be striving to reach? Think about that while I bring on our next guest.
My name is Eric Wickstrom. I am the Director of Audio Description for International Digital Center. Pronouns are he, him.
Hi, my name is Reese Lloyd. I'm the studio head for Descriptive Video Works. My pronouns are he, him.
When anyone asks me for examples of quality audio description tracks for networks and streaming platforms, IDC and DVW are the two I tell people to check out. Are there others? Yes. But they don't check off the same boxes that these two do. Let's keep it real. IDC helped kick off the inclusion and hiring of blind narrators. They're not the first, but to my knowledge, they've done the most. And if I'm wrong, please, seriously, educate me. I'm at readmymинdradio@gmail.com. DVW also is doing the same, and they employ Blind QC. I asked each of them to bring 3 to 5 issues that most threaten the future of AD and some thoughts as to what we can do about it. That's next in part 2 of this episode of Flipping the Script on Audio Description that I'm calling No One Will Save Us! Big shout out to my guest, Michael McNeely, for shedding a little light on captions. Make sure you tune back in for part 2 of this conversation. The best way to do that? Follow or subscribe to Read My Mind Radio wherever you get podcasts. There's transcripts and more over at readmymind.com. And remember, you got to spell it. That's R to the E.
D, and that's me in a place to be.
Like my last name. Peace.